Welcome to the City of Farmers Branch City Council study session for Tuesday, December 10th. Our first item of business this afternoon, item C1, is to discuss regular agenda items. Councilman Reed, you have any items for?
For the next, yeah, I'd like to have a conversation on processes for the sale of, we could have a conversation on the processes for the sale of city-owned property.
Thank you.
Oh, that'd be future.
Mayor, are you on regular agenda items? Discuss regular agenda items.
Discuss regular agenda items.
Sorry, I just want to make sure.
Oh, yeah, because we're discussing, we're going to have that inside the executive session.
Okay. Duly noted. Councilwoman?
No, sir.
Councilman Roman?
Yeah, I just had a question, just to clarify on K10.
Yes, sir.
So the $29,945 for the chair purchase, does that include delivery?
Correct, yes, it does.
Okay. And at the first sentence of the legislative text, it says that it would also include installation, but then we have a second quote for them to be put together, so is that,
Just to clarify, the Uline quote is just for the actual chairs
Okay.
and delivery. The contractor is for actually the assembly of the chairs. So
Okay.
it's actually, in your agenda packet, it actually is separate. I believe you have the resolution, the quotes for the chairs, and then a separate one for the
okay, got it.
installation.
I just wanted to make sure I understood that. And then, did the last quote that we saw, did that one include a quote for the chairs to be put together?
No, Uline doesn't assemble the chairs, so they would just deliver them to us, and then that contractor would put them, that's a separate quote for them to assemble the chairs.
But the last time we talked about this in open session,
Yes.
I don't think it included a quote for assembly.
I think one of the last ones we did have the same, basically the only difference with this one is we had, I believe the last chairs you looked at before they didn't have the padded chairs, and we went ahead and made sure these are almost exactly just like the chairs we have here in council chambers. So that's why the quote's a little bit more. And then we have the assembly of those chairs is a separate quote.
Okay, so you're saying assembly was included the last time that we had talked about this?
Correct.
Okay, all righty, I'm good, thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Neal?
Yes. Talking about consent agenda items or regular agenda items?
We're discussing any questions you might have about regular agenda items
Regular agenda items.
or consent agenda.
Okay.
Is-
So as with regards to M3 then, on the regular agenda items?
Which one?
M3? Do we have availability of articles of incorporation or bylaws for that organization?
Hi, Erin Flores, Deputy Director of Administrative Services. I'm sorry, can you repeat your question?
This corporation, we have articles of incorporation as well as bylaws for that
Yes, we do.
organization. Is that something you could share with me or email me?
Absolutely, yes.
That's all I need.
Okay.
Thank you. Councilman Jackson?
No questions, Mayor, thank you.
Very good, thank you. In my haste to get started, I actually left out one of our items, which is public comment on study session items. I don't have anybody signed up to speak as public comment. If anybody does wish to speak, this would be the time to raise your hand, fill out a form. Seeing none, we will continue to move on. Our next item is item C2, which received an update from the Metrotex Association of Realtors regarding real estate and short-term rentals in Farmers Branch. And I have invited Matthew Church from Metrotex Association of Realtors to come up and share some information with us. Just introduce yourself again.
Well, thank you, Mayor, Council. My name is Matthew Church, Vice President of Government Affairs with Metrotex Realtors, and it's a great audience here. I'd love to see a lot of folks from the community engaged in the civic process. I'll tell you a little about who we are, what we do, and why I've been asked to speak on some of these real estate-related issues. The Metrotex Association of Realtors is a 27,000-member trade association that represents real estate practitioners throughout the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. Not just realtors, even though it's in the name, we also represent mortgage brokers, commercial folks, those who may or may not be in the rental space, leasing and property management. But by virtue of being a member of Metrotex, you're also a member of the Texas Association of Realtors, which has approximately 150,000 members. And by virtue of being a member of both Metrotex and Texas Realtors, you're also a member of the National Association of Realtors. So our total membership nationwide is a little over 1.5 million. And why that's both interesting and really exciting is the fact that we are engaged locally, state, and federal on regulatory and policy issues at each layer of the government. And there's a funny, or not a funny saying, but there's a saying in real estate that all real estate is local, just like all politics is local. But it's actually true, because many of the decisions you guys, gentlemen and women, make on this council, that's what impacts the homes, the property taxes, people's pocketbooks. And it's really important, the decisions that you make, and that's why we are very much engaged in the issues and the policies that you're considering. So that's a little bit about who we are, what's going on. We're like most of you. November had an election, and there's a lot of turnover at the legislature. There's turnover at Congress. And even though real estate's local, decisions that are made at the federal and state level directly impact the decisions that you're going to make and decisions and discussions that we're going to have. And so some of the basic things that we ask for are a predictable regulatory environment and sound monetary policy. Well, I'm a little bit early on having that conversation, but it does lead me into some of the local issues that we're discussing, because it does have a wider range of state and national implications. So some of the issues locally that we typically address, obviously property taxes is a big one for every homeowner, every taxpayer. And there's a misperception out there that just homeowners pay taxes. Renters also pay property taxes too. They just pay it in the form of their rent. And so whenever property taxes are levied, or whether there's discussion on city budgets or revenues or taxes, it impacts everybody, whether you own a home or rent. And so that's why that item is essential to us. But other items include property rights related issues such as short-term rentals, which I'll discuss topically about where we have engaged on that issue, and I'm happy to entertain any questions on specifically short-term rentals. But Councilman Reed, you brought up divestiture of city-owned assets. That's actually a wonderful conversation about selling city-owned property, because density can be a bad word when we're having a municipal discussion, but it's not a bad thing. We have to be forward-thinking. You as planners and as policymakers must be looking at the future. Some decisions we made as both stakeholders and policymakers in the past, I hate to break it to you, there's still 1,000 people a day moving to the state, and there's more people coming. And there's prosperity, there's job growth, which is all the things that we as Texans want, but it's going to put downward pressure, continue to put downward pressure on the services and the expectations of our constituents. So when I talk about density, we are very much engaged in both the research phase and implementation of policy objectives on how do we plan? In other words, what type of zoning, what type of land use studies and conversations do we want to have in the future? And really what we are coming up against, which is consistent with short-term rentals, is there's this prevailing thought between constituents, policymakers, and practitioners that some things sound good, but they don't want it next to them. And folks like the idea of density, except in their neighborhood. They don't like the idea of duplexes, triplexes. Well, we as an association are here to help you make informed decisions on what types of both challenges we see and what type of product developments that you can consider as you plan going forward and do land use policy discussions. So, short-term rentals. Again, it's a challenge because, and I'm sympathetic to the decision you have to make, and I've spoken to council in Dallas, I've spoken to council in other cities on this very issue, and they all struggle with where does one person's property rights start and stop versus where do their neighbors' property rights start and stop. Many of the laws from a state perspective were written before short-term rentals were really a thing. Much of the property code that addresses rental property is done so in the term of single-family home or multifamily that was done with the idea that people rent property for an extended period of time, not for 48, 36, 72 hours. So with this new product that's entered the marketplace 20 or so years ago, we are just now seeing the byproduct of how does this impact local policy. So going back to where does one person's property rights start and stop versus their neighbors, we have to be sensitive to that because we advocate for private property rights. But the minute that someone's property rights infringe on their neighbors, that's actually counter to private property rights. So what we ask and and I've worked with your neighbors to the north, Carrollton, on their ordinance a couple years ago, is to be fair, is to also provide you the opportunity to enforce rules that either exist or that are derived from this policy discussion, and provide you the ability to go after bad actors while not being punitive to those folks who are practicing a leasing a property based on a shorter term lease. So some of the discussions that we've had with short-term rentals exist to some extent. We expect that, you know, when there's an infringement of already existing code, obviously that's a code compliance issue. But all of these recurring issues, if they exist, put pressure on your staff and their ability to enforce code. So what's some things that other cities have done? Some cities have enforced for example, a 3-strike and you're out, or a temporary prohibition on that individual's property, if so long as those code violations are proved to be violations. I would also really encourage the platforms to be part of this discussion. Airbnb, VRBO, they can be very helpful in being proactive in rooting out problem properties. They can also be value added when things like collecting hotel occupancy tax, that discussion comes up. So there's ways to get over some of the hurdles that you're facing, but the bigger issue is from the general public is the safety and concern and the integrity of neighborhoods and the ability for how do you protect one property owner's rights while also protecting their neighbors. And so as far as a policy discussion, if we can focus on rooting out the bad actors while preserving and protecting the ability for those who are practicing in a positive way, that's a good place to start. And our organization, like I said, has been central in these discussions in other municipalities, and I commit myself to you guys today to also be part of that discussion here And whatever way, working with code compliance or whatever city staff you need me to discuss and have a conversation with, I'm happy to do so. I know that's a lot and topical, but I am happy to commit our organizations both research and expertise on this issue.
Thank you, Matthew.
Yeah.
I want to open up the floor for questions, and I have a few, but I'm going to save mine and let council go first. I'm going to start with Councilman Reed, since he's a real estate professional and knows this probably better than the rest of us.
Matthew, good to see you again.
Good to see you.
Question, where does Dallas stand right now in regards to policies on short-term rentals? Is there anything pending? You could share that with us?
Yes, City of Dallas, there's a temporary injunction on their ordinance, and I know there was a hearing on that in mid-November, and I'm not sure what the next hearing date is, so it's in a holding pattern. The ordinance that they passed a year and a half ago or so. So it is tied up in litigation.
All right. So currently, are homeowners allowed or not allowed to offer short-term rentals?
That's a good question. I would actually have to go back and look. I don't know if the injunction prohibited, kept it in place, or prohibited it from going into effect. I would need to
All right.
check on that.
I vaguely remember that it was just something pending, that it had not gone in place, but I don't trust my memory either. I'm getting old. Can you give us some examples of how short, in addition to hotel occupancy tax, which is a potential financial boon to a community, what other positives that has for our community?
Well, I can tell you one, and this is relative to the Dallas-Fort Worth region. The World Cup Selection Committee chose this region for 9 sites, or for 9 games. And this region, as it entertains large, broad, multinational types of events, they look at the product types, the ability for, in terms of transportation, hotel space, and there are folks that come from abroad or domestically that they are looking for a variety in housing options when they stay here short term or for an extended period of time. The other issue too, we have found in certain communities, not here locally, but with my colleagues in other parts of the state and nationally, is those who are in medical care, who might be receiving treatment at a medical facility. They would prefer to stay in a house as opposed to a hotel or even hospital, if that's an option. And so the ability to rent a home and be comfortable on a term basis that's not a month or a year annualized rent is something that's very attractive to those folks as well. So the marketplace is more than just renting it out for a long weekend because you want to get out of town. There are folks who like the comfort of home, and when they travel, they like to feel like they're at home even though they're somewhere else.
And then lastly, what experience do you have in regards to the impact in general that short-term rental property has on the market value of a home or a neighborhood?
That's a phenomenal question, and we've done a lot of research as an association on that, and it's distorted because property values in this state, in this area, are rising, and it's hard to put your finger on one reason why. And with the short-term rental product being so readily available for an extended period of time, yet we've seen a tremendous amount of growth, it's difficult to find a correlation between market value and or assessed value and the fact of the rental, single-family, short-term nature of the property. The truth is, we live in an area where it's a great place to live and a lot of people want to move to, so values are going to continue to increase so long as that exists.
Okay, that's all I have for now.
Very good. Very good, thank you. Councilman?
Hello, how are you?
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. So Dallas does have the injunction on the ordinance, but they do allow them because of the injunction.
It prohibited it from
different-
going into effect, yes.
Yeah. So I've done a lot of research on this in the last couple of weeks. Ben, can you remind me what Dallas charges their overnight fee?
I'll have to look it up for you, but we can find that for you.
Okay. Do you know what we charge?
I believe I have a staff member here that can answer that
Okay.
one.
Perla Tavera, Director of Economic Development, Tourism and Planning. Are you talking about average hotel night or Airbnb? Because of course it would vary depending on holidays, but our average hotel night is about $137.
But what is the tax that we charge?
7%.
7%. Do you know what Dallas charges?
I do not. I can look it up as soon as I get
Thank
back.
My question goes to, going back to the values of the properties, specifically either one of you, in Farmers Branch specifically. Dallas raised their tax, overnight rate tax, to push out. That's how they handled the injunction. And so we get more of them here. My question would be, how do we mitigate that, where it's spread out? In our neighborhoods, we're not really, even the parking isn't, it's not great to have a party in a neighborhood. And that's seemingly what we have more of. And that's what I hear from my residents when I was D3 and D2. And so I would like to know, when we have this discussion on the short-term rental, how do we help our residents?
Want me to go? Okay, I'll take this one first, I suppose. It's a great question, right? Because are we talking about every single Airbnb that's hosting a party? Are we talking about one that's recurring? So obviously with parking, a parking violation is already an existing code problem. So part of the initial challenge is enforcing what already exists. And I can be very sympathetic to that. That's a problem in and of itself. And I imagine the code enforcement department would agree that, so long as that exists, it's going to be harder and harder to police it if more and more folks, and it's not just the city of Dallas, it's cities to the north too that have also taken the short-term rental issue up. And so there's marketplaces that don't allow it to exist. And so where it does exist is just centralizing the issue. So understanding that, I would first focus on habitual offenders of already existing violations. Find a way to make it prohibitive, or, like I said, a couple cities I've known have given them a 3-strike and you're out, and put them on a moratorium or some sort of leave, and prohibit them from participating with a short-term rental. And then that will at least be able to, in short-term, redirect resources to if there are any other existing properties that are problematic. But the challenge other cities face is they feel like that's a whack-a-mole solution to the problem, and it would be easier to just make it very restrictive or outright prohibit them from existing, which is what raises the legal challenges. And that's a whole different set of issues. And so where do you find that balance between preventing that issue while being able to protect and preserve the neighborhoods? My first recommendation is to start with the ones that you know are the bad ones, and start with the habitual offenders. Find ways to be creative with policy and enforcement of that policy to prohibit them from continuing that type of behavior. And that will allow the good ones to either go unnoticed, or if there is any other elements of infractions, to allow your resources to be dedicated to those.
I will just add on, we can bring this as a study session item for further information. Thank you.
Her answer was a lot easier than mine, wasn't it?
Yeah. Councilman Roman?
You mentioned that you guys are conducting different types of studies to look into different things related to real estate, and it sounded like specifically short-term rentals. Can you tell me a little bit about some of the studies that you guys are doing?
Yeah, we ask, so from a broad perspective, I looked, one of the most recent studies I did on not just short-term rental properties, but rental properties in general, was we have policy discussions and we have a lot of practitioners in that space, but I wanted to see what my membership, the 27,000 members of MetroTex, many of them, most of them are independent contractors, and they don't get your traditional 401k or have a pension. They invest in what they know. And so whenever I'm able to have a policy discussion with folks like you, I also want to speak on the issues of not just my members, but the public, but also from my members' perspective, any policy that may, or whether it's intended or unintended consequences of a policy, prohibit the ability for them to invest in rental property. I want to make sure that we're doing it in a sound and respectful manner, because we found that our membership, over 70% of them, invest in real estate and have either rental properties. And again, most property managers, specifically in like single family residential, from a long-term lease perspective, you're talking about individuals who have 1, 2, 3, 4 properties. You're not talking about large institutional investors, mostly, generally speaking. So any policy that's considered that makes it more prohibitive or cumbersome for them to be able to rent their property just adds on cost to them, which the renter and the consumer ultimately pays. And we're in an environment where, as home values and property values continue to go up, it's putting a lot of pressure and downward stress on already existing property owners, but it's also making it very difficult for those who want to get into home ownership. It's a challenge because it's more costly, and the more costly we make it, the more prohibitive it is from an entry standpoint. And so we want to thread that needle, right? We want folks to be able to have the ability to purchase properties as either an investment or as a primary residence, but we also want to protect the ability for those who already have that existing product to keep it.
That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Councilman Jackson?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Matthew. It's a very interesting topic. For those that are watching and for your knowledge as well, we do have a short-term rental ordinance in Farmers Branch, and generally it requires someone that's going to rent out a property for less than 30 days to apply for a permit, have an inspection, they pay hotel motel tax, and then we do have a 3-strike rule within our ordinance. And it's been effective. It was effective 2 doors down from me back when it was first implemented. So I think it's done very well and serve Farmers Branch's purposes well. I would have a question more for Ben. Ben, let's say I ask you a question, how are things going in our short-term rental ordinance enforcement and compliance, all that? What would you say? How would you react to that question?
Well, 2 ways. One, we haven't been sued and stopped from enforcing it, which I think is critical because that's where a lot of cities fumble because there's a lot of discussion. We also did something that I believe was different from a lot of cities. When we enabled this ordinance, the council brought in all of the residents that had short-term rentals, and you got to hear from those residents. What we found was we had a very small number of bad operators, and it does flare up every now and then. We have an excellent code enforcement team back there that makes sure it's handled pretty quick. It takes a couple months to go through the process, but so far it's been very, very effective, and our residents are great about telling us when there's concerns. So I would say it's working very well because we don't have an injunction. Every city that seems to try and go way above and beyond, they end up in an injunction, and it's kind of open season on short-term rentals, and it's going to take forever to resolve, and then there's nothing the city can do.
Yep, that's kind of what I've expected, because I haven't heard anything about short-term rental issues of late. We have them from time to time, but the chronic issues we were having before we had the ordinance are a thing of the past at this point, so that's a good thing. I want to go back to, you were talking about investors buying properties and causing property values to increase around them, making natural home ownership a little bit more problematic. I really know nothing about this area, but I've heard things, right, from residents saying, well, gosh, we have all these foreign investors that come in and they'll pay top dollar or more than top dollar for a property. And now all of a sudden, people who normally could afford to get in this neighborhood can no longer afford to get into this neighborhood. Can you talk about that in terms of our Metroplex area and just sort of the popularity or the commonality of that occurring and sort of where you see that going? Has it cooled off any? Did the pandemic have any impact on it? What are the trends around that?
That's a very relative question. Just today, the Wall Street Journal actually had an article on this, and during the pandemic, with interest rate environment being really low, so the cost of capital was really low, the folks who found the ability to purchase properties and hold on to the asset to be quite lucrative, which investing in real estate, it can be a lucrative endeavor. However, post-pandemic and with interest rates increasing, you would have thought that that would have slowed down some. And to some extent, the private equity money and the institutional investors' activity did slow some. It still exists, and they're still focused on it. But what we're seeing in areas of new development is entire communities of rent-to-own properties being developed. And so that, again, is a business model that works. But what that does is it reduces the pool of properties for individuals to then go purchase themselves.
Right.
So the challenge is, how do we get those folks who are aspiring to be property owners the ability to do so in a high interest rate environment, in a low inventory environment where costs
Is high.
are increasing? And it is a challenge that not just Farmers Branch is facing, not just Dallas-Fort Worth as a region, the entire state and other states are facing. Florida, one example was another state cited in that article. What do we do from a policy standpoint? Incentivizing home ownership, making sure that the development review process is effective and affordable for development of that type of property. Also being very sensitive to our populations of folks that may be on a fixed income or seniors, making sure make sure that their ability to afford the home that they're already in is protected and preserved. That's another angle to this, is there's an entire population who have been in their home for decades that with the rising assessed value of their home and the subsequent property tax liability, it becomes a challenge.
Right.
How do we teeter all those things? The first place I would start is, let's see what available properties, what ways the cities can find available places for development, what development types fit and work, because what the consumer wanted 25 years ago isn't what the consumer wants today. I hate to admit it, but I'm a millennial, and I'm an older millennial, but most of my friends and colleagues, they may not want the 4,000 square foot home, 3-car garage. A quadplex or a townhome type of development is attractive to that generation. But how do we plan? How do we develop it? How do we keep the integrity of already existing neighborhoods while incorporating that type of development? And finding a way to blend those two is, I believe, the first and best way to success.
Yeah. And that leads to some of my thoughts around, there are various pressures on home prices. There's interest rates, but there's also foreign investors. There's been the pandemic, now a change in, legislative environment that seems to continue to fuel a rise in rentership, right? And multifamily properties and development. We're seeing that a lot. Just up and down the 635 corridor, it's changed dramatically just in the last 5 to 10 years. with the addition of a lot of new multifamily properties. And so you see that continuing, multifamily development trend continuing to increase?
Well, yes, because people are moving here. And so we need that product to house the people that are coming here. And it's not just out-of-state folks that are moving to the DFW region. It's inter-Texans. It's folks from other parts of the state that move for whatever various reasons that are all coming to this region. And your location is central, and it's that much more valuable each passing day that exists. And so from a housing stock standpoint and from folks that are moving here, they need that type of product. But how do we get those folks to be aspiring homeowners so that they can then so that they can then participate in home ownership and build wealth and transfer that generational wealth to their next of kin? That's what we really need to be focused on, and we need to focus on the types of products that we have available and the available space that we have. And there's absolutely a need for multifamily. There's probably a need for more multifamily if current population just keeps going the way it is. But how do we get those folks that go into that product into owner-occupied home? That's going to be the challenge, where we need to find what types of products fit their needs.
Yep. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilman Neal?
Thank you, Matthew. Just to follow on a little bit regarding the studies that you might be involved in, are you aware of any, are there any studies related to infrastructure, public safety, additional enforcement requirements with respect to short-term rentals being more prevalent in the community?
From a public safety angle, I would have to look. I'm happy to reach out to the National Association who have done a lot of research in this space and see what they have in regards to public safety. I have not seen any, but I'm not saying that it may not exist.
Okay, thanks. Last thing, I keep hearing this word density coming up rather frequently, and I'd like to know, in your opinion, or if you're aware of any studies that might indicate at what density level, say for a 10 or 12 square mile city like ours, with that density, at what density percentage would that then begin to return additional retail and restaurants, amenities like that? So,
If you would give me a couple months, I can tell you, we did a comprehensive land use study for all of Dallas County. And I can provide you and that was based on tax roll data, that was based on DCAD's data from 2021. We are in the process of updating that research now, and what that land use study does addresses your very question on what product types, the mixed-use residential retail development. I'll give you a brief synopsis. When we looked at Dallas County, the most valuable building in Dallas County was one in downtown Dallas. I think it's 1600 Pearl. And why? Because per acre, it was worth more than any other piece of property. And what we did with the research was we changed the perspective of this conversation to look at land and land use from a value per acre standpoint. So when you plan and develop, look at each and available piece of dirt that you have and look at ways of finding products from a housing standpoint, from a commercial standpoint, from a retail standpoint, that maximizes the value of that dirt that you have. And we are in the process of updating that research now.
great, thank you very much. I'd be very interested in seeing some of that data when you
Happy to.
have the time to share that with us. So that's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you. Matthew, thank you for coming in. This is an ongoing discussion that I want to keep going because I think it's really important to have somebody like you to come periodically to help educate our council. I do have a couple of quick questions because I know I'm going over my time here that I allowed, but with respect to reporting of hotel motel tax for short-term rentals, you find that most entities, most cities, I should say, are self-reporting meaning that it relies on the operator themselves?
That's how it initially, so when short-term rentals and the online platforms became available, that's initially what happened. As more and more cities experience individuals renting their home on a short-term basis, some have found ways to either work with the platforms themselves or require that individuals, once they do a registration program, their requirement of reporting the hotel occupancy from that point is, it's one of those two angles that typically approach.
Do you have any information or research that shows the percentage of people that are complying with the registration in various communities versus those that are running rogue and trying to rent their property and just taking the risk of not being caught?
No, that's actually a great question. I don't have any research on that, but I'm happy to pose that question to folks who might be able to. That's a
Okay.
great angle to look at.
All right. I'm going to flip subject just a little bit, and that is, we haven't talked about attainable homes, housing, or the missing middle. And we recognize there's a need in Farmers Branch. We have what I would call, and I've said this publicly, housing disparity, because we have part of our city that is going through major redevelopment, and everything's selling like hotcakes, and homes are getting torn down, and new homes going up. That's great. We have an older portion of our city that is economically challenged and is not seeing that renaissance yet. And then we have a western part of our city, 635 Luna, which is a brand-new city. So, but no matter where you live, housing prices continue to skyrocket.
Right.
So we are trying to address some of that through the development of attainable housing, working with programs like Builders of Hope. You familiar?
We have actually participated with Builders of Hope as well.
Okay. And then the Dallas County Housing Replacement Program that we're involved with. So time will tell, but in my mind, those are programs that serve a need and help to address the continuity and the integrity of neighborhoods, because we're not coming in and allowing folks to build McMansions, if you will, in the middle of all one-story homes,
Right.
things of that nature. So I'm sure you have some thoughts on that and how that's working elsewhere also.
Well, it's a very sensitive subject, right? Because on one hand, you want development, you want redevelopment, you want to incentivize folks who purchase a property and improve the value of that property. That's to their benefit. But the downstream consequence is the folks who have been living in their property and who may not have the affordability to improve their property. The rising tide is raising all the boats, and they're being priced out of their home. And how do we make sure that that population is both protected and preserve their ability to maintain the affordability of their home? You're not alone in that challenge. Every city with growth faces this. It's one of the pain points of growth. And so my first thought on that is identify those areas that may be impacted, identify the needs of those folks, whether it's access to, I'll give an example, some cities, it's access to grocery stores. It's access to retail that isn't available in their part of town that is only available in other parts of town. Find ways to work with development, retail development, commercial development that can provide that improved quality of access to resources and retail for those areas that are I don't want to say suffering, but have challenges. And also find ways to make it cost effective and prohibitive for them to be able to reinvest into their property, whether if it's through a grant program or collaboration with groups like Builders of Hope or other housing service types of organizations that provide resources and or knowledge, skills, and ability, or even funding for them to access those resources and improve their properties. Because what no city wants, but what some of the unintended consequences of development become is there's a population that exists that gets priced out of their home, and there's no next best place for them to go that is affordable, and they end up in a situation where they have to move, and they don't have the ability to access the same resources that other folks do. And so focusing on the resource part first, so that we can find ways to help, and then work that way, as opposed to just letting folks, buy up swaths of land and redevelop, because that's going to negatively impact a certain population.
Understood. Okay. So maybe what we need to do is have our own little Farmers Branch Housing Summit to talk about this, and that's something where I could see we have a panel from council, maybe a panel from our planning and zoning, but then invite members of the public to come in and just roundtable this issue some more, just to see where we can go.
Yeah, ask them. They'll tell. The public is very willing to tell you, I'm sure, what challenges they're facing, and that can help guide the discussion. And from our standpoint, from the Realtor organization, we're happy to help participate in both the education process and the research collection phase, not just the research I mentioned on land use, but I can send you quarterly housing statistics, or actually I can send you monthly housing statistics on just the city of Farmers Branch, what type of activity is occurring, and then whatever available research we have, both from the state perspective or from the national perspective as well.
I think I speak for everybody. We would welcome that. It helps educate us, and we need to recognize and learn more about the needs of our own community if we're going to sit in these chairs.
Well, I think you guys are doing a great thing by even having this conversation, and by looking forward, thinking, and looking for those solutions. It's going to benefit the city and the constituents.
No, thank you. Anything else? Anything else? I want to thank you for coming in. This won't be the last time, so you and I will have additional discussions, and we'll see where we can, what comes out of this and where we go next.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, and if anybody else has questions, I'm happy to help. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you so much. All right. Next up is item C3, receive a year in review update from the Zoning Board of Adjustment.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I am Connie Hardy, and I serve as Chair of the Zoning Board of Adjustments, and I'm here today to present the annual update to you for the board. And I'm not sure how to work this, and I was told I would have help. Thank you. The ZBA mission statement is to provide an appeal process for citizens and stakeholders of the city of Farmers Branch. We provide a mechanism to seek relief for city codes and ordinances that may create unusual circumstances, physical limitations, or property hardships that could adversely affect these citizens and stakeholders' use of their property. Our meetings and activities for this year have been as follows. The board consists of 5 members and 2 alternates chosen by the City Council. The board also hears appeals for the mandatory crime prevention program and short-term rental license suspensions or revocations. The board has not had any of these types of cases in 2024. Our meetings are dependent on a request for a variance and will be held on the last Thursday of the month. And so far this year, we've had one meeting in January, and that was a result of a request filed by a citizen. And we do have another meeting scheduled next week, I believe, and that's our year. So this will probably be the shortest presentation. You're here all night. Any questions? That's basically it for us.
Very good. Thank you, Connie.
Thank you, thank you.
Council, any questions?
Thanks, guys.
I think what would be helpful is moving forward, if there's ever any sort of recurring or ongoing or some pattern of appeals that are going on, it might be helpful for us to know, so that way, that might be indicative of a situation where we need to go in as the council and evaluate whether a policy is serving its purpose. So just obviously not for this year, given the lack of appeals that have been filed, but in the future, I think it's helpful to know if there's some sort of pattern.
Perfect. We'll definitely keep that in mind and do that. Thank you.
Anything? Very good. Thank you. Next up is C4, receive a year-end review update from the Animal Shelter Advisory Committee.
Mayor, Council, Tyler Winkler, Animal Services Manager. Unfortunately, our chair and vice chair had scheduling conflicts with the move to the 3 p.m. start time, so it feels odd presenting this presentation. Not here to toot my own horn. This is the presentation that we came up with, but I'm here to present it to you all. Alrighty, so here is our 2024 meetings. We generally meet 4 times a year unless there is something that's added to the agenda and there's a special called meeting. We always meet at Fire Station number 2 at 4060 Valley View Lane. Meetings are generally held on Wednesdays at noon. I would encourage all of you to attend. I would love for our residents to be more involved, and I'm sure they'd love to see you all there. We've had lots of new folks move on to the roster. The only update to this is Jennifer Rainey's position has been filled by Danielle Summers. But everything else here is current. We've got a new veterinarian, lots of new residents on the board, so all good things to see there. So I'll just give you all some quick staff and facility updates. Yearly, the Texas Department of State Health Services generally audits most animal shelters in the state. We were audited this year. That being said, there were no corrective actions taken against our shelter, so we passed, which is great. City staff were working with Quorum, the original architects who designed our shelter, on a needs assessment and conceptual design for an expansion project. We've had several meetings with Quorum at our shelter, so once we're farther down the road with that, we'll be happy to present that to you all. Shelter staff has completed lots of training. I'm a huge stickler for training, and we've done lots and lots of training. So the thing that we wanted to highlight was their fear-free shelter programming. This is roughly 12 hours of continuing education that we had everybody take. They've completed that, so all of our staff members are now designated as fear-free, which is great. It helps us handle animals more effectively and reduces fear, anxiety, and stress in our shelter animals. Staff participation and shadowing opportunities. So our staff has had the opportunity to visit several nonprofit and municipal shelters, which is a great way for them to learn, and it's a cost-effective way for us to teach them new skills. We've been able to steal some great things from other shelters and bring them back and implement them here in our city. One thing I wanted to highlight is our Operation Kindness partnership. So since we formalized this partnership in March of last year, we've been able to save roughly $70,000 on medical care. So Operation Kindness has been able to provide that to our city, which is great. We've been able to roll that over to provide more advanced care to some animals who we may not have been able to care for otherwise. So that's a really, really great partnership for us. Community outreach and engagement. Hopefully you've seen that we've been trying to be a lot more active in our community. We've been at pretty much every city event that we've been able to be at. There's been a few things that we've missed that I hate, but such is life. Our animal officers are doing door-to-door outreach in some targeted areas in our community. It's slow going, but it's happening. So far, we've knocked on 125 doors where they're passing out informational flyers, where they're passing out dog treats, food, just really things to start a conversation so we can try and shift the perspective. Lots of folks who are scared to contact us for help, and that's what we're trying to change. One thing I wanted to note is of those 125 homes 72 homes had pets, which is right on par with the national average of about 60%, which was interesting to see. So it'll be good for us to get those numbers so we can do a little bit more in-depth analysis of what the actual animal population is in our city. Our animal services officers are now trained to microchip animals in the field. We get a lot of recurring violators, folks who maybe we're writing a ticket to. The ticket is not getting the compliance that we had hoped. So one thing that we've been able to do is, instead of just writing them a ticket, we've been actually able to become an ally in helping them resolve those issues. And as we pick animals up, we're actually able to identify where they live and bring them back home, which negates them ever coming to our shelter, which saves staff time, it saves resources, and it's been pretty impactful. We have been practicing enhanced enforcement of Section 18-70, which mandates that animals picked up in Farmers Branch and impounded at our shelter are sterilized. Since we've been focusing on this more heavily, we've been able to order the sterilization of 37 animals in our community, which are 37 animals that were found roaming in Farmers Branch, were impounded at our shelter, and are now not reproducing, which is good for us. And again, we've been participating in a lot of off-site adoption events. I wanted to highlight the program that we did with Operation Kindness. We were able to partner with them and serve 108 community pets. Most of those animals were from Farmers Branch. There were a handful that came from surrounding cities, but a majority of those were Farmers Branch residents' animals. So we were able to get them vaccinated, microchipped, and up to the legal standard, which was great. And it was a good way for us to interact with our community. So last slide is the things that we've done to expand life-saving. We've put a huge emphasis on foster care in our shelter. We've had a 300% increase this last fiscal year over the previous fiscal year in foster care. And the reason that that's important is it allows us to leverage our community partners and expand shelter capacity. We all know that there are times when our animal shelter is full. You've probably seen our social media posts. It happens rarely, but in focusing on moving animals through foster care, we're able to get animals out of the shelter and into homes. So this year, or last fiscal year, we had 159 animals get sent into foster care. We have an expansive list of rescue partners and organizations, in-state, out-of-state. We've been working on, reviving some of those partnerships. We've been able to send roughly 20, I think the exact number is 19 animals on out-of-state transports to New York and New Jersey, which is great. Prioritization of our feral cat TNR program, Trap, Neuter, Return. I'm sure all of you get calls from constituents that there's lots of roaming cats. We get those calls as well, and we're trying to address that. So we're really focusing on, there's a few target areas where we get a lot of calls in, so we've gone door to door and handed out flyers, just educating the community on what is Trap, Neuter, Return, and what the process is for Farmers Branch. And then we have implementation of a new owner surrender and diversion program. So we're not only focused on animals leaving our shelter, we want to try and ebb the flow of animals coming into the shelter. And one way that we do that is work with our residents who are looking at surrendering their pets and trying to triage those. So what animals have to come into the shelter today? It's an emergency situation. There's nothing they can do. The animal may be dumped. And then those other folks who might have a little bit longer lead time. So those folks who, it's an emergency, they can bring their animals in and surrender them. If it's something that we're able to put them on like a 2-week appointment list, we'll have them come in, vaccinate those animals, microchip, take pictures, get a behavior assessment, so we can start pathway planning for those animals so we know what resources will need to be focused towards them. That's it from me. Do we have any questions?
Thank you, Tyler. Council, any questions? Councilwoman Bennett?
Can you describe for our residents what a no-kill shelter is and how that applies to us?
Yeah, absolutely. So in general, I will avoid using the term no-kill when describing municipal animal shelters. We are required by ordinance to take in animals from our city. Farmers Branch Animal Services is not a no-kill shelter. There is generally a 90% threshold for no-kill. That's the national standard. I've gone through for several years. I don't see a year that we've reached that 90% threshold for the entire year. So Farmers Branch Animal Services is not no-kill. Now I will say that this last fiscal year we are nearly no-kill, which is a really great thing, and I think that the no-kill designation is something that we can strive for. But I do pause when I want to describe a municipal shelter as no-kill, because there's resource disparities. So we oftentimes get compared to, we as in Farmers Branch Animal Services, we'll get compared oftentimes to nonprofit animal shelters, and it's an apples and oranges comparison. Nonprofit animal shelters do a lot of great work in the community. They are really strong partners of ours, and we rely on them. But they are able to close intake. Generally speaking, there are some that have government contracts that can't, but by and large, they are not required by mandate to take in animals from their community. So when their shelters get full, they close off intake and they don't take any more animals. We don't have that luxury. So that's one of the reasons why I try not to describe municipal shelters as no-kill. There are municipal shelters in DFW that have that designation. At this time, we are not one, but it's something that I would like. That's the goal.
What would it take to get to that moment for you?
So for us, with our facility expansion project happening, I think that is going to be a really great step. Shelters our size, I will say that we have almost all the resources that we need. One of the key factors is us not having a full-time veterinarian, and then frankly, our shelter is not large enough to necessitate a full-time vet. I would love to have one, it just doesn't make sense for us. And so right now, we are actively, this morning I went and met with an outside veterinarian to try and outsource some of the medical care that we can't provide to them at low cost. Texas has a really odd law on the books where animal shelters are not allowed to provide veterinary care outside of emergencies and sterilization surgeries to residents' pets. Unless you can prove indigency, which is, there's not a definition, there's not a threshold, so it's difficult. That's something that will hopefully change this year. I think if the Texas legislation can get that changed, I think that will help us as well. Because there's a lot of things, folks come in all day long, we get calls from folks asking to surrender their pet. And so we've really, tried to work with the community in a different way than we have in the past, and try to get to the root cause of the problem. Because most of the time, it's something that we can work together and solve, and they can keep their animal at home. But for us, I think that continuing on the path that we're on, focusing on foster care, building our out-of-state transport networking is going to be beneficial. And then I think with the shelter expansion, we can do that. With the shelter expansion, may need to come some more staffing, but that can be a conversation down the road.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anything over here?
I do have one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Hey, Tyler, good to see you. Thanks for coming in. Quick question. I see a lot on social media about people who have lost pets, people who have found pets, people who want to rehome pets. When should they get in touch with you, and what is the best means to do that?
Absolutely. So I would encourage anyone who's looking to rehome a pet in Farmers Branch to reach out to us first. The way that I see it is the pet, if it lingers in their care and they all of a sudden get to the day when they have to rehome it, today's the day. I would much rather know about that a month in advance so I can pathway plan for that animal to come into our shelter for resources, and I can start working on an outcome. I would say as soon as someone knows that they are going to need help, I would definitely have them reach out to us by phone, by email. Our shelter, it's one of the only ones when you call, you actually get a live person. Most shelters you call and you get a recording. One of our staff members answers our phones, which is great. But I would say often and early when folks know they need to surrender an animal.
Okay. How about lost or found pets?
Yeah, so lost or found, we get a lot of inquiries for that. So we haven't done a huge social media push because it's something we're still figuring out. We recently partnered with an organization called Petco Love. They use facial AI software to actually, so it searches through the Ring database, like Ring cameras, Facebook, Paw Boost. There's a lot of those rehoming sites. What's the other one? Nextdoor. It uses facial recognition technology. It searches those websites and can actually give you matches. And it also looks at other area shelters. So in the next few months, I anticipate that's something we will roll onto our city website. But right now, if you call us, that's going to be the first thing we tell you to do is go post your animal on Petco Love. We have an account, and it will show us on the back end what animals are marked as missing, if there's potential matches. So if you miss it, we can reach out to you. And then the other thing, too, that we will tell you is go on Nextdoor, go on Facebook, use social media. Our officers are very good about searching social media, Facebook, Nextdoor, Paw Boost. and trying to find potential matches. So we do everything that we can to try and reunite pets with their families. That's the goal.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And Councilman Jackson?
I was just going to say, Tyler, I've seen your group on Facebook a number of times helping lost pets find their home, and I just wanted to say good job doing that. Y'all are pretty active there, and I know that, you know, when there's a picture of a lost dog or a roaming dog, I mean, I saw one today. A lot of people tend to jump on Facebook and try to help each other out, so it's kind of interesting to see that come together in such a quick way, and appreciate you guys' involvement in that.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks, Doug. Can you help, for my information as well as the residents or those who may be watching, how you handle animals that come into your facility that may be behaviorally challenged and or have particularly heavily burdened medical issues? How are those animals handled and addressed?
Yeah, absolutely. So, those are the two most difficult situations. We do not have a behaviorist on staff. My team they are super great at recognizing behavioral issues in animals and trying our best to resolve those. And, you know, I won't sugarcoat it. There are times when an animal comes in that despite our best efforts, we, you know, deem the animal unadoptable. It's a threat to public safety. But that being said, we do our best to try and mitigate those. So we've sent staff to, dog play groups. I know that sounds silly, but what you would see at a dog park, it's something that's not been done in animal shelters a lot because there's been this mindset that, you know, we don't know where these animals come from. They may be dangerous. They might injure each other. Several of our staff members have been trained through a group called Dogs Playing for Life. We actually sent them to Dallas Animal Services for that. And for behavior cases, that's kind of the biggest key factor. Most dogs can be in a play group. We've yet to have a dog enter our shelter that we've not been able to integrate in a play group of some kind. And that's really where we're able to let the animal decompress and see its true behavior. If you visited our shelter or any animal shelter, or you can imagine, they are scary places for animals. We do our best to make them as comfortable as possible, but they're still scary to the animal. So we try and recognize that the behaviors that they display in our shelter are not always their true behavior. I personally have a dog who, if she ended up in an animal shelter, she would most likely not make it out. And we understand that, and we try our best to make sure that those animals have the best shot possible. So what we would do is bring those animals in, perform a behavior assessment. We've got forms for it. Everything gets filled out. Based on what we see there, we will reach out to rescue groups that are focused on taking behavior animals, or, you know, maybe we know somebody who might be willing to come in and do some free training in our shelter. That's usually our course of action, and then integrating them into a play group type setting. But there are times when, you know, despite our best efforts, it's just not possible. As far as medical care, we have a few outside contracted vendors. If an animal comes in who is irremediably suffering, it happens with, you know, fairly frequently. You know, if we do a consult with our veterinarian and the prognosis is great rapport and euthanasia is the most kind outcome, that's the course of action that we follow. But we always consult with our veterinarians first. I'm not a veterinarian, so we lean on our veterinarian partners to make those decisions for us.
Thank you. I think you're doing a great job.
Thank you,
Appreciate it.
thank you.
That's all, Mayor.
All right. Thank you, Tyler.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Next up is C5, receive a year in review update from the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Howdy, Mayor, Commissioners. Thank you very much. Appreciate you having us out. The Planning and Zoning Commission, you can advance that. That would be great. Or I think, here we go. I now have the power. We are, of course, an advisory board, so you hear very often our desires in terms of recommending approval or denial to the City Council. And it's really around our development and use of private property and the planning of public improvements. And we are comprised of 7 regular members and 2 alternates whom you see on the screen there. Thank you also to our team and their wonderful photoshopping skills for folks who couldn't be in attendance. Our highlights for the last fiscal year, we did receive and see 23 development applications, including 13 that were zoning amendments. SUPs were 3, detailed site plans 3, and final plats 4. We did see a number of those ordinances that were updated. Our mobile food unit overlay district, so we can have food trucks in some of our areas, very exciting. Also, detailed site plans previously had no expiration date, so we rectified that. And an ordinance around home occupations and giving some clarity there. We've had an excellent focus on training, so really want to commend our staff in that respect, including a bus tour that some of you attended, so thank you for those from City Council who could be in attendance, for our Design District and Bishop Arts bus tour, looking at some revitalization and really reuse opportunities that could be applicable in some of our areas in Farmers Branch. Also, the Texas APA Midwest section training. Again, I know some of you are able to attend that training, which I have attended in the past and find excellent. So if you didn't get the opportunity, it will hopefully arise again, and it is highly encouraged. As well as the APA Texas State Conference, which was recently held in Allen, Texas, and at which we won a Planning Excellence Award. And that award is really addressing how much planning is crucial to our desires, needs, and challenges within our community. And this category of award emphasizes outcomes and demonstrates how planning helps to create stronger and more equitable communities, for which I commend the City of Farmers Branch. In terms of the criteria there, it's around originality and innovation, also transferability and methodology in our work, engagement with our residents, and the effectiveness and results. Speaking of effectiveness and results, we have an excellent work program ahead of us. We will be very busy in planning and zoning, including use table definition updates. So lots of work to be done there. Also for ordinance amendments, we have application materials, checklists, and online resources that we're enhancing to just provide that clarity and consistency around our process for planning and zoning, as well as our long-range plans and implementation. So as you're aware, we've already begun implementing some of the Interstate Highway 35 East corridor study. I will remind you that is an award-winning study in the City of Farmers Branch at the state level. And we have upcoming work in target areas 2 and 4 to be done there. So look for those forthcoming. Lots of exciting work there. Also, our comprehensive plan, we had a huge effort and outreach with residents on the comprehensive plan. We heard, thankfully, from many residents, and we want to ensure that we implement that so that those needs are heard and addressed. Also looking forward to coordination with our active transportation plan and our sustainability group, so lots being worked on there. We will have a continued focus on training in planning and zoning. That was an emphasis, and we agree that these are sometimes technical things, so it's great to hear those resources and workshops, different training sessions offered. We also look forward to our annual joint session with City Council and opportunities to learn together, and another upcoming bus tour. So that is to be determined, but staff put together really excellent resources along with that tour and guide to really help us understand some of those uses in North Texas and City of Farmers Branch. And with that, I will take any questions. Thank you. I also realized I didn't introduce myself at the beginning, so I'm Amber Raley, Chair of Farmers Branch Planning and Zoning.
All right. All right, thank you. Any questions over here? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Amber, I just want to commend you and express my appreciation for all the hard work you and the Planning and Zoning Department does, and our Planning and Zoning Committee. And I ask that you convey that appreciation to your staff. I think you guys are doing a great, wonderful job. Real help to the city. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, and also thank you for your past service on the Planning and Zoning Commission. Much appreciated, and I know you know what goes into that. So I will do my best to convey that, as I do frequently, to that group. Yes.
Councilman Jackson.
It's basically what I was going to say, Amber. The Planning and Zoning Commission is one of the busiest boards, and I don't think most residents understand the amount of work and time that you guys invest in making sure that our city develops and grows according to plan. So thank you again, and as Councilman Neal said, please pass that on to the commissioners.
Will do, thank you.
Councilman Roman?
No, just wanted to reiterate what my colleagues had said, which is thank you for all the work you guys are doing, and please share that with the commission.
Thank you.
Councilman? Amber, one comment, you know, the 2045 plan, the comprehensive plan was and is very important to the city. Council has already made some decisions relating to that. I might suggest that sometime next year, we have a joint council and planning and zoning meeting to discuss and review where we are with that. Just baby steps, but nevertheless, because we've already taken action on some things, that leads me to believe that not everybody's in alignment, so let's have a review.
Thank you for that. Certainly always appreciate those joint sessions where we can make sure we're in sync and have clarity. And I'm sure our staff can help us arrange that.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you kindly.
All right. Next up is item C6, receive a year in review update from the Parks and Recreation Board.
Thank you. My name is David Jones, and on behalf of the Parks and Rec Board, I actually serve as chair of the Parks and Rec Board. On behalf of the Parks and Rec Board, I want to thank the City Council for giving us this opportunity today to give you our year in review. Also want to go off script just real quickly because on behalf of the board, we want to thank the excellent leadership team that we have in Farmers Branch that serves Parks and Rec, specifically Robert Diaz, Jessica Alvarado, Mark Moffitt, Ashley Munoz, Paul Macias, and Linda Gouchin. We have an outstanding team that serves Farmers Branch. We want to recognize them, and very, very thankful for all their efforts. On behalf of the board, I'm representing the board, our mission and our vision. Let's see, what's the process for moving the slides? How do we do that? What do we do? Oh, wait, that's too far, sorry. There you go. So the mission of the Parks and Rec Board is to make recommendations pertaining to the operation of park facilities and recreation programs. Our vision is to be continuously aware of the recreational needs of our residents, to create, repurpose, and adapt our parks and facilities to meet those needs. We've done a lot, had a lot of different events. Specifically, if you look at these 7 events listed here, if you add the multicultural event and the Fish and Fun event from the spring, the July 4th Independence Day, the Blue and Bluegrass from the fall, the November 11th Veterans Day celebration at the Rec Center, Feliz Navidad last Friday, and then also the Christmas Carnival. Now, the Christmas Carnival last Saturday, unfortunately, was rained out, but these numbers represent what happened last year. If you take these 7 events, it impacted 26,000 people. The team has really made a big impact on the community. As far as what's coming up for the rest of this year, this Saturday we have Pancakes and Pajamas. Will be held December 14th at the Recreation Center. As we transition to next year, 2025, 2 events in the spring, the multicultural event, the Fish and Fun event in the spring, the July 4th Independence Day celebration. We're bringing back for 2025 the Halloween event. We're going to call it the Frighten and Fun Fest by popular demand. And also we'll have the Holiday Carnival. We look at success stories. We've got lots of success stories, but we're going to highlight these 6 success stories. First of all, in January, we opened up Hoya Park. Now, Hoya in Spanish means jewel, and this truly is a jewel, this park representing our city. We also had a very successful Gateway to the Globe event on March 23rd, and that was produced as a result of the Multicultural Task Force working with the council. Very successful. Also, things that the team has done to enhance the quality of life here in Farmers Branch. Specifically, the team completed a list of Mercer Park improvements. And also the state-of-the-art facility, the Venue 1842 facility, opened up in Historical Park. And on November the 1st, on Texas Arbor Day, we planted a tree, a ginkgo tree, on Rawhide Trail. It's within walking distance of the Mansky Library. Continuing on, the team also made great progress regarding medians, and I want to actually recommend Councilman Neal. I actually heard from a member of our board who lives in the Oak Brook area, north of Brookhaven, and was very, very thankful for the work that was done to transition the treatment or the care of 3 medians in Oak Brook from the Oak Brook HOA to the city of Farmers Branch. And also in January 2025, we'll be able to transition the care of the medians over at Mercer Crossing from the HOA there to the city of Farmers Branch. In terms of quantitative results, success in numbers, specifically we had a 6% increase in the use of the rec center by residents of Farmers Branch. And as you'll notice, the aquatic center experienced a 70% increase in use by members. And you may be asking, how did we do that, a 70% increase? The reason that was done, or the way that was accomplished, was because the seniors are able to do a 3-pass where they get used to the aquatic center, the rec center, and the branch connection all in one. And that's why we had the big increase in the use of the aquatic center. The team's done a great job in beautifying our city. Specifically, they replaced 87 trees due to winter storm damage, and also has done a tremendous amount of work on the median and rights of way maintenance. And one good example of that is look at all the work the team's done on Valley View. Done a great job. As we look forward into 2025, as we mentioned earlier, we're going to bring back the Halloween event in the fall of 2025. It's going to be called the Frightened Fun Fest, once again by popular demand. The Gateway to the Globe event was so successful last March that we're going to bring that back again for 2025. And with much anticipation, the long-awaited, all the work that's been done on the Branch Connection, Phase 2 will be opening in spring of 2025. We've got great plans for what's going to happen out of Mercer Park 2, Phase 2. And also there are 2 specific parks that are being rehabbed, and those are the Squire Park and the Dutch Village Park. And the team's done a great job in terms of looking at what could be done, but now what they're doing is they're actually soliciting input from the members, the community that are impacted by those 2 parks, and they're going to move forward with that. And last but not least, in terms of the Net Promoter Score, or NPS score, this 83 number you see on the score, that's actually an aggregate of the 3 different facilities, the aggregate score from the Branch Connection, from the Rec Center, and also from the Aquatic Center. And just as a little bit of background, the Net Promoter Score is a management tool used to gauge an organization's customer relationships loyalty and can be associated with revenue growth. An NPS score of 50 or greater is considered excellent, and anything over 70 is considered to be exceptional. And once again, that 83 score is an aggregate of 3 different facilities. That concludes our prepared remarks, but we'd like to turn it over to City Council if you have any questions.
Thank you so much, David.
Thank you.
Council, any questions over here?
So we can't say enough about our Parks and Rec groups, right? The board, the staff, they really make our city come alive. The one thing that I'll say is all the work, and you mentioned this, all the work that's been done on Valley View Lane with cutting back some really tall shrubs that needed some maintenance. Man, that was a really scary thing to see at first. A lot of residents went to social media, and there was a lot of chatter about it. But once the crews got done and got all that cleaned up, it looks really nice. And I'm sure that those trees are all going to come back, very healthy, and it's just going to continue to look better and better. So thank you to the team for all that work.
Thank you. Just on a personal note, too, I'm not from Farmers Branch. My wife grew up here. I moved here in 2020 when I retired. Farmers Branch is a fantastic community. I mean, really, this team just does an amazing job. But thank you. Thank you, Councilman Jackson.
Yeah, thanks, David, for all that great information and all the hard work that you all do. But my question is more directed towards the city or city staff. I'm just wondering if I could be provided a cost breakdown of the events over the past 3 to 5 years so we can see projecting forward, costs are increasing. I don't want to get to our budget next year and then be scrambling to try to get such information because many residents enjoy these events and some are fantastic and want to keep those, and others might need some improvements. So if somebody could help me with that information,
We can
that would
get
be
that for you.
great. Great, thanks. That's all I have, thanks.
Thank you. Councilman Roman?
Thank you for all the work that you and the committee do. I know that you guys have a lot of events, and I see you guys at all of them. So I did, so in the past, we've had a number that's been presented to kind of talk a little bit about the cost recovery of the recreation center. I know that was a big initiative in the past. So I was wondering if you guys had any numbers or details on that.
We can get you some more of the recovery numbers and
Okay.
get that data for you. Sure.
And then I saw on the slides on there that you had mentioned something about the median transition, and I was just curious to learn a little bit more about the involvement of the board with that.
Well, we were keeping the board up to date on the progress of that through the course of the year, and as the process was going through the discussions with council, and like I said, Mr. Jones said that we have a member on the board that's lives in the Oak Brook community. So when we would bring that up, that's really, it was just kind of keeping them up to date and in the loop of what the process was.
Got it, understood. And then this is probably more of a staff question here. I remember the library board's presentation, and they were sort of focusing a little bit more on the west side with certain new initiatives and programs that they were doing. So I was hoping to get an understanding of what the total membership is for these different facilities, the Branch Connection, the rec center, and the natatorium, and then separately showing what the memberships are for people who live on the west side.
Gotcha.
And then this one is directly to the board. I think one thing that might be really helpful to do is to maybe solicit some feedback from people who live on the west side and see if there's some unique programming that you might be able to do either there or that might appeal to them. I know that the Mercer Park is going to be coming online. We're going to have a presentation here shortly to talk a little bit about that, but just so that we can find ways to encourage them to utilize some of the resources that we have, like the rec center, the natatorium, Branch Connection, and so forth. And so it's something that the library board was doing, so I thought it might be good to share something that they're doing and encourage you guys to do that. And then the multi-sport center that you probably see being built right over here off of the service road on 35 is going to be online very shortly in this coming year, early in the year. So it might be good for you guys to work with them and see if there's some sort of unique programming or partnership that you guys might be able to endeavor with them and the board. So it might be something good. So just wanted to share some thoughts. And that's it. But overall, thank you for what you and the rest of the board are doing.
Thank you. And if I could just go back to the whole Oak Brook comment, the point that one of our members was making is that he indicated that that had been a long-standing issue, that it seemed to have been going on for many years, and he complimented Councilman Neal for getting involved and actually helping that getting taken care of. So that's what I meant to say about that. He's very thankful, he's a member of that neighborhood, and just thankful that it actually got it done, and thank Councilmember Neal specifically. Anything else?
Councilwoman? Councilman Reed?
Again, thank you, David. Good to see you again.
Good seeing you too.
To piggyback on what Councilman Rowland was saying about for the west side and the services that are provided, wanted to see, and I think this might be where you were going, is if there's any type of fair or recruiting type event that we could have over there, maybe as part of the park opening or even at the amenity center, to just introduce folks on that side to everything that the city offers. I think that would be very fun and inclusive. Secondly, I know that, and I applaud you guys for this, a lot of renovations at the rec center this year. Working through, the staff did an incredible job working, juggling, and the same thing with Branch Connection right now, juggling all the residents and still providing services and allowing usage. Is there anything else that's scheduled for the rec center, or are we pretty much done there for now?
I think for now, the phase 1 and 2 improvements, that's all we have scheduled for any kind of updates at this point.
Excellent.
Very good. Thank you, David. Appreciate
Thank
the
you.
report.
Appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Okay. I'm going to skip C7 for now. We're going to go to C8 because of time. We do have a hard stop at 5 o'clock. C8, which is receive report and provide direction to the city staff regarding franchise trash service.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council. Shane Davis, Deputy Director of Public Works. Last time we discussed this was in February of this year, so this is a continuation of this discussion. So overview, for Farmers Branch that are unaware, the commercial garbage collection is an open market system. So the businesses or industries can negotiate service with any vendor they choose. The vendor is supposed to pay the city 10% of the gross revenue. Currently, based on our survey of staff driving around, just looking at some of the different dumpsters we see out there, we found there's about 30 companies operating. There's about 1,000 containers within the city of Farmers Branch. That 1,000 containers is going to be an important discussion point when we get to later on this presentation. There's 4 companies that handle most of the waste in the city. And that's Republic, Waste Connections, Waste Management, and CWD. So from the city and the council's concerns, we've heard it's the looks and aesthetics of some of the streets when you have multiple different colored dumpsters close to the street. The reporting party or responsible party, sorry, for environmental issues. So if we have a spill in the roadway, which of the 30 companies possibly created that spill? The responsible party for noise issues, which we get anyway for enforcement, which means we have to basically do a stakeout and try and figure out, just sit in the community till we hear something get picked up at 4 in the morning, and then try and figure out where that truck's at and figure out the company. Then garbage overflow. So if you don't have the right size dumpster or not, your service is not frequent enough, you tend to have garbage overflow. Most of this comes out of Chapter 66, which is solid waste, which falls on this department, but code enforcement certainly gets involved in its property maintenance standards and things of that nature. And so for us, like I said, the noisy complaints are the ones we gotta get up early in the morning and figure out who's causing the problem. This is just a picture of some of the areas where I discussed, you have multiple companies on the same street, so this look has not been found to be appealing. So some options we discussed last time is maintain the current system. We can look at increasing regulations and enforcement, see if there's ways we can tweak Chapter 66 or any other ones to try and tighten things up if there's a bigger issue in terms of enforcement. But I think the one we're probably going to spend most of our time is discussing the potential for a franchise. So it's either one or a limited number of vendors within a city. So if you're looking at franchises, there's about 3 ways you can handle it. Again, you can set up an RFP where folks provide proposals for, you can divide the city up into 4s if you wanted to, and have 4 vendors, or however many sections. We're not a big city, so probably 1 or 2 is probably max. They still have enough revenue they can generate if they got the proposal. Another thing we'll look at is, if we went down this path, is are you going to have carve-outs? Some of these are national companies in the city. They've already negotiated a contract with a company to provide service to all of their businesses across the country. That can be a challenge. School districts tend to have multiple facilities within the city, so do you want to do a carve-out for entities like that? They already have a contract set up if we're trying to work with them. Compactors can be a problem. For those that don't know, a compactor is a roll-off box where basically it's a blade that kind of pushes the trash in to get as much material in there as possible. You see them quite often in apartment complexes. There are some businesses, sometimes they are kind of tailor-made for the business and the collecting company itself, so those can occasionally be tricky. This is not an exhaustive list, but the ones I'm very familiar with are McKinney, Louisville, Frisco, and Plano, as far as the ones that have one vendor for pretty much everything. There are some caveats with a couple of those. I tried to reach all 4 of them. I spoke with Louisville and Frisco. Both of them have franchises in place for about 10 to 20 years now. Frisco's a carve-out for just C&D material, that is open market. Louisville does it for commercial recycling, that's open market. But everything else is handled through one vendor. Louisville has Republic. Frisco uses Waste Connections. Plano, if you care, also uses Republic, and McKinney is, they're the most recent one I really wanted to talk to just to see how their experience went. And off the top of my head, I forget which one they're using. Some of the challenges you're going to face if we've looked at the franchise, you're going to get pushback from, I went through this once, one of the first projects I was involved with when I got to Farmers Branch was looking at trying to franchise garbage collection on the commercial side. You will get pushback from commercial entities. A lot of them don't want government interference. It is, I want to be able to negotiate whoever I want to, or with whomever I want to. If you can give me a better rate, I don't care. Just stay out of my business and let me do what I'm doing. So that you will get pushback from some of the businesses. They don't want you telling them who they have to use. Some of the companies also pay what's called a waste broker. The broker's job is to go find the cheapest service they can find, and that's what they pay them to do. Once you enact a franchise, you're looking at that. That takes that away from them, so you'll hear back from waste brokers as well. With some of the cities, you know, the biggest challenge is, again, just the pushback from their businesses. As far as like tweaks and things of that, more of them are just kind of contractual, little things they'd like to see just based on their current contract. The term of it sometimes can be quite long. But the big one, which I referenced earlier, is we had 1,000 containers. If we looked seriously at a franchise and went that direction, guess what? Almost all those containers have to be changed out. And so trying to keep the service going while you're switching out dumpsters and having the company find a way to procure 1,000 dumpsters to get them here, there's a little bit of lead time that's involved with something like this. And it's just something to be aware of. We're going to be staying on top of that if you're serious about a franchise. At this point in time, I'm going to stop the presentation, take any questions or concerns or comments you may have, and really look for direction of how do you want to proceed, if you have an idea at this point in time.
Thank you, Shane.
Yes, sir.
Councilman Jackson?
Shane, thank you. I have to imagine going from the arrangement we have today to, a different arrangement would be very difficult, but not impossible.
No, it's
right?
not.
But my concerns, I wouldn't say are so much the looks and aesthetics of different colors of trash cans. It's just the inability of us today to be able to find, trucks that are causing our city problems.
Yes, sir.
Busted hydraulic lines, because there's a lot of hydraulics on these trucks that move these big bins of trash and the roll-off containers and such. It's burdensome on code enforcement when you have overflow or you've got fluids that are leaking out. We don't know a lot of times what those fluids are, where they're going. We got a lot of creeks,
Yes, sir.
so that stuff can go in the creeks. There's one picture you showed in there. It's close to a culvert, a runoff culvert.
Yes, sir.
So whatever's coming out of those trash cans are going into our creeks and ponds.
Yes, sir.
If there were one vendor, or if the vendor relationships were more centralized and coordinated and overseen by the city, we would have a much better control over those characteristics that are harmful to our city. So in that regard, I'm supportive, but I want to recognize that this seems like a pretty big project,
Yes, sir.
right? Okay. The part that I'm not clear on yet, you've not presented this to us yet, is the cost to the city in changing the current arrangement. Impact to the business owners, I totally get. Maybe they're finding the cheapest service available. And if we centralize, we might not be able to meet that price point, and that'll be a cost that they'll have to bear. There are national contracts that, we probably couldn't or wouldn't interrupt. The schools are a different thing. Those are managed separately. But I believe that this warrants deeper research and understanding. We may not end up making any changes, but I think that the cost impact to the city and the impact to the business owners, I think that needs to be further explored.
Got it. We can put together what we get currently from commercial collection, as far as like, here's the revenue we generate. It's we have a budget projection, what we think we're going to get each year
Yeah.
from commercial collection, which we can
Yeah.
provide quickly to council. That's easy to get.
And maybe it's not an RFP, maybe we do an RFI,
Got it.
right? We just do some searching, data gathering to add to that so that we kind of get a better picture of that impact.
Got it. And I can try and dig into other cities, see what their prices are listed out there that have a franchise already, just get a sense. Now, of course, if you're a bigger city, you have more volume, so the pricing's probably not gonna be apples to apples given the size we have, but at least it's another thing to look at.
Right, well, these other cities, Louisville, Frisco, Plano, that, even McKinney, they're much larger than Farmers Branch and more spread out than Farmers Branch. I think there's some pluses and minuses there, but was the general feedback from those cities when you talk to them that what they have now works well, or it
For
doesn't?
the two cities, they like the fact that it's one phone call. If there's a problem, I know who I'm calling, you're fixing the problem. That's kind of the same with us. Mike Rivera has to get up at 4 in the morning, go sit out there on Garden Brook or something and listen for a sound. May not happen that day, so we got to keep
Right.
going until we hear it. The residents complained, and we usually find it, and then it gets resolved, but it's still staff time. We're getting up really
Right.
early and trying to figure out who is causing this problem.
Right. I think the ability to leverage that is very important to the city, but I also want to balance that with the business owners, rights and preferences and such. The main focus here is to, ensure that our city is protected, because some of these problems, we don't recognize them until they're really big problems, it seems.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Councilman Neal?
Thank you, Shane. I'll just start by saying that I'm a free market guy.
Understood.
And so therefore, I understand the challenges we have here, but as business owners, I think we should solicit those business owners for some input on this. And I don't 100% object to reducing the number of vendors, but I wouldn't go any less than two vendors, or possibly 3, it would be my thinking. But primarily, I think we need to solicit some input from the business owners and get their input, as well as derive maybe a better ordinance around the placement of those bins. I know a lot of them are put right up against the roadway there, usually to facilitate ease of access to get in and out, but that does provide the eyesore that folks have mentioned regarding aesthetics and symmetry, so.
In this particular case, the Garden Brook Street is just tough because there's really no place to put them behind the building because of the way it was set up.
Right, because we do have some ordinances for their residents where they have to put their trash cans in the recycle on the side or behind to a degree. So I'd like us to look towards some kind of aspect similar for those types of businesses.
And
too.
new ones, we do have that regulation in place. It's these
Yeah.
older ones that have been in existence for decades. It's a little bit of a challenge, but I hear what you're saying completely.
Right. Yeah, that's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Roman?
So as I was looking through this agenda item, I was just trying to figure out what the goal is. And I think I hear the goal being trying to find a way to much more easily address some of the issues that we are encountering with these large trash cans. And it's hard to do so when there's so many vendors out there. I think it maybe would require more research. And I'll be specific. I wonder what it would look like to maybe implement some sort of policy or ordinance that would require them to have some sort of contact information on these to identify who's picking them up. And I suppose that might help from that perspective, and maybe strengthening our ordinances regarding some of these issues that we're experiencing. I don't know if that's going to necessarily solve it or not, but that's kind of where I'm looking for your feedback on this. I just wonder if there's another way that we can approach this issue, because I've experienced it in my district as well. I just wonder if there's a better way to approach it that doesn't require us to go in the route of just eliminating all of the competition and saying, hey, we're just going to allow business with 1, 2, or 3 people. So, yeah, I'm just wondering if there's something else we can do.
Alex, we have looked at the ordinance. I'm trying to see what other cities are doing, how they're addressing noise complaints and stormwater concerns, just given the proximity of some of these dumpsters are to a couple of our channels. So,
Yeah, because I could imagine if it's also, if the levy against somebody who's violating one of our ordinances is much higher, it carries a little bit more influence, I believe, in encouraging better behavior.
The environmental, they're preset, if I remember correctly. I think it was at max, the judge can assess, but it's up to the judge's discretion slightly, but there is a max, if I remember correctly. Did I get it right?
That's correct. For health and safety sanitary ordinance violations, you are, the maximum is $2,000 per violation. But each day that they're in violation is a separate violation.
Okay.
So the judge chooses
Yeah, I mean, if $2,000 is a lot for a trash
I would
issue,
agree.
and each day being in violation, I think is enough. Is that what we currently have in place?
It should be, yes, that's the threshold. So it's up to the judge, like I said, the judge's discretion, how much he wants to assess in terms of a fine.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly in favor of finding a way to try and resolve this, but I feel like it is a lot of work, and I just want to make sure we exhaust other avenues before we go to that approach.
Understood.
Yeah.
So most of them have been handled through phone calls. It's just a matter of us figuring out who it is and then calling them and saying, hey, you got this, here's your truck number, here's a picture, we were out there this morning.
Yeah.
Don't service this before 7 a.m. because you're within so many feet of the residence, so.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman?
My position hasn't changed.
Understood.
Welcome back. Restrictive trade practices and government overreach. I agree with Councilman Roman and Neal that we need to, and Jackson, that we need to address the issues that the residents are having and even our code enforcement, but restricting whom they can choose from. I think when you ask the businesses and you call them in, you need to have the prices of what it would look like prior to that, so they can make an objective decision.
What we can do is issue an RFP, get proposals back in, and then see where we end up, so.
Thank you.
A couple of quick questions. Do we have an idea of what the breakdown is? I know they're dealing with a lot of private accounts, but the breakdown is in regards to usage of each of those 4 vendors.
We do. We have the I don't know off the top of my head. I can actually get that easily for you.
Okay.
So, like I said, most of them, that's lower end, those 15 on down, it's just a few accounts. Some are just onesies and twosies, so it's really hard for us to catch those folks. There's a lot of time would be put in trying to chase them around and make sure they're paying us. But for the major ones, yes, they're really good about complying and submitting revenue information. But we can certainly look at our most recent survey and get that to y'all, so you can see the breakdown.
Excellent, that'd be great to
Okay.
get a look at. And with the cities that you've spoken to that have utilized a single vendor program, have they given you an idea of whether or if there were a cost savings per user?
Typically, there's not a cost savings on the business. It's a reduced rate to the residents, to be honest with you. Usually marry the two together, and your residents see a cheaper garbage collection cost is the way it typically works out. Not all the time, but that's typically what happens.
Okay. So typically, it's financially beneficial for the end.
There is, for the folks that are paying full price, like I live in another city, I'm paying over $20 a month for my garbage service. So if they were to franchise that and it reduced my rate, I'd be a happier resident of that city, but.
And then lastly, it's just from a lifestyle perspective, I guess, it seems like it would take more trucks off the roads because we'd
That is
have
one of the benefits, for sure.
one going down, servicing one alleyway, and you don't have a truck on Monday, a truck on Tuesday, a truck on Wednesday. So from
Yes, like in this bottom left one, I see at least 4 or 5 different companies. In this case, you have one truck, not 5, going down the street.
Exactly,
So that is one of the benefits. You have less trucks.
right. So that's just one of the things I want to point out. And that's all I got.
Very good, thank you. I'm going to hold my comments and questions till the next time that we discuss this because I don't know that we have direction to move forward except other than to get additional research on it, so I'll wait. So with that, we're going to recess now at 4:53. We've got a council photo that we've got to take. There will be a reception in the lobby at 5:30. And then we will resume back here for the regular meeting at 6 o'clock and then finish study session after the regular meeting. Thank you.